Usually when I do these anniversary videos, they're for games I highly regard. Each I talked about left me with a good impression when I first played them, and it was a pleasure to revisit as well. Even if the experience of discovering new games is always welcome, giving in to nostalgia never hurts. That is, if you actually liked the games in question. Since you know what this video's subject is, this introduction may confuse you. After all, almost everyone and their mothers praised Irrational Games' Bioshock Infinite when it was released in 2013. Well, my dear viewers, every one of us had that one game that they simply can't understand how or why others like so much. For me, that game is Bioshock Infinite, which left me deeply frustrated and in some aspects even angry when I got my hands on it when it came out. I didn't even have the patience to finish it, that's how much I disliked it. But let's not get ahead of myself. I'll be honest though, I committed the sin of never playing the first System Shock, briefly playing System Shock 2 long ago and skipping Bioshock 2 altogether. But that being said, I've been a great fan of the original Bioshock, which I played over multiple playthroughs. I enjoyed its captivating art, I was amazed by its excellent twist, I was fascinated by its setting, but most of all, I was immersed in its gameplay. It's, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most significant immersive sims out there, even if it's kinda light on that. The fact that Infinite was announced to continue on this foundation was encouraging, and I was very interested in seeing what Levine and his team would achieve. The initial contact with Infinite only furthered the optimism. The game puts you in the shoes of Booker DeWitt, a man paid by a mysterious employer to find and return a girl in exchange for erasing a gambling debt. A very noble purpose. The girl's location is in the physics-defying floating city of Columbia, ruled by an all-powerful prophet. It doesn't take long to notice that, like Rapture, Columbia is another definite home run from Irrational. Its visual design is mesmerizing for lack of better words, and the way its features are presented to the player is astonishing. I'm a massive fan of the architecture and general art direction, and I love how the propaganda posters are drawn and written. They do a really great job of unveiling the philosophy guiding Columbia, but more than that, I appreciate its rhythm. You'd be forgiven if, after putting so much detail and lore behind this whole city, you fall to the temptation of dumping all of it on the player as soon as possible. But Infinite drops information gradually, peeling off Comstock's work one layer at a time across the first act. Soon enough, Booker discovers that the girl he was sent to find is locked up in a colossal statue towering over the city. Also, she's portrayed as the lamb in Comstock's propaganda, groomed by her father to become the heir. And much to his disturbance, posters warning of a false shepherd are plastered with the accurate description of Booker down to his scars. Because of this, he's soon found out, and what initially appeared to be a simple snatch and grab is now a fight against the city's law enforcement. This is where the magic starts fading. Remember when I said Bioshock and immersive sim in the same sentence before? Well, forget any of that, because Infinite is a simple linear shooter. The gameplay loop involves walking into an arena, shooting bad guys and moving forward. I'll give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. The level design of the fighting arenas has a lot of verticality built into them. The skyhook allows you to jump and take quick rides across the arena, giving you access to varied positions that can change the fight. But outside of that, they are not very interesting to fight in. Sorry to give you false hopes by starting with a compliment. For starters, the AI is brain dead. They run aimlessly without any sort of intelligent movement. The melee opponents charge you while the ranged shooters stay in the distance and pepper you with bursts of bullets. Very rarely do they take cover or make any move that resembles tactics, and only partially due to the simplistic level design. It leads to horrendously stupid situations where you can just stay at a distance and headshot them one by one while standing completely still, with little to worry about. It doesn't help that the enemy variety is relatively small, with only the firemen pushing you into switching tactics in a significant way. Later in the game you'll face a few more unique types of enemies, but besides the large health pool, they don't come with anything special. Returning to the story, once he finally reaches the girl, Booker realizes she's locked inside and experimented on because of her powers to open interdimensional portals. The sheltered girl is called Elizabeth and is desperate to escape her prison. Booker seems to have landed at the right time to facilitate this. Elizabeth is the key to the game's entire plot and, without a shadow of a doubt, an interesting character. There's no point in going in detail about her, but I will say that she has an excellent character arc that is well paced and works well with her previously established personality. The same goes for Booker, but there are more pressing things to discuss in detail later. From this stage, the game turns into a lengthy escort mission. Before you recoil at the horror of this concept, Infinite manages to make this entirely tolerable by avoiding all the tropes associated with this gameplay style. First, Elizabeth cannot be killed and takes no part in combat. The only thing she does is hand you over resources from time to time, usually when you're running low on either ammo or salts, the game's mana resource. When it comes to ammo, it kind of breaks the economy for good and bad reasons, but I'll also get to that later. As you progress through the story, Elizabeth will also be able to open up portals that bring helpful stuff to the battlefield. She can bring turrets, ammo, medpacks, walls for cover, and other things. It's a neat feature that does open up new ways to play out combat situations, particularly since you are not allowed to open more than one tear at a time. Unfortunately, besides a few cases where I wanted more mobility or some ammo, I didn't have much need for them. The arena's bland layout remains so, despite this mechanic's potential. Yet another missed opportunity. This is because the game's difficulty combined with its combat mechanics makes for a big mess, which is why I'm not super hot on Bioshock Infinite. First, let's have a look at the arsenal at your disposal. The special powers you have access to with the help of Vigors are a mixture of uninteresting and redundant. You've got crows, a lightning bolt, a tentacle and a cyclone that all stun your enemies in different ways, for instance. I don't care about the fireball because it's difficult to aim with, and the leap melee power consumed too much mana even when fully upgraded. That also leaves out the direct damage Vigors in consequence. Because of this, I only used lightning bolts for their chain stun and increased damage vulnerability when applied, and possession to get money back from all vending machines. I'm not saying that good design means you have to use every vigor imaginable all the time, but I think it's safe to say that using only 1 out of 8 in combat does not leave a good look. For some reason, trap mechanics from previous Bioshocks can still be set up, but because of how Infinite works, they're utterly pointless. Setting up ambushes is impossible, and playing stealthily isn't something you can do either. More so, no opponent is as threatening as the Big Daddy, so you'll never need to set up a fight before engaging. The big enemies you do encounter are impossible to prepare for, firstly because they spawn after the combat starts, so you're not even aware when they're coming, and even if you did, there is no sneaking. Spotting an enemy triggers the combat sequence most of the time. The guns aren't any better, but here I have to make a caveat. It may have been 10 years ago, but my experience playing on the hard difficulty was frustrating back then, with enemies acting as bullet sponges and my weapons being very ineffective. For this playthrough, on the other hand, I went with the normal difficulty, and my initial impression of gunplay made me think I was wrong to dismiss the game the way I did. Using a pistol and a carbine, I could easily proceed through combat with enemies gunned down in a matter of seconds. Then, during the story, I swapped my carbine with another gun, and that fell through the level geometry. Oh boy, that was an icy shower indeed. What used to be a chill playthrough quickly turned into a painful slog only because I lost a gun due to a bug. Because of this, now I'm aware that I wasn't wrong about gameplay in general. Most guns are very ineffective, many are not fun to use either, and enemies take in a lot of damage before deciding to give up on living. The last point is not apparent initially, but even the carbine isn't saving you from this issue in the final stages. But then I came to my second realization. 10 years ago, I was playing Infinite on hard, and among other changes, it gives you a lower spare ammo cap, and Elizabeth throws resources in your direction less frequently. These two things make a considerable difference due to how unenjoyable this aspect of the game is. I did not mention that in Infinite you can only carry 2 weapons, just like in any generic shooter of the time. Additionally, the game loves to keep changing weapons commonly found as you progress through the story. These two wouldn't be a problem when combined if all guns didn't have their own unique ammo pool. Thus, you are forced to keep picking up guns as they come your way, regardless of whether you like them or not, because you constantly run out of ammo. The aggressively selective scarcity is the game basically deciding for you what guns you will use next. You might say that you can simply buy ammo at a vending machine, and you'd be entirely correct, if you didn't have to sink your money into upgrading your weapons first. At the start of the game you can get away without upgrades, but this doesn't stay valid for a long time. The upgrades themselves are boring percentage increases in damage, recoil control, ammo pool or reload speed, but nevertheless they're vital in saving your ass in fights. They're pricey, making the perpetual forced weapon carousel a sad affair and frankly infuriating. Why force me to spend so much money to upgrade guns when I have no guarantee I'll be able to use them for who knows how much of the game? How can you spend money on your favorite gun to make ammo consumption more efficient if you're left without money to fill out your supplies anyway? Don't get me wrong, the normal difficulty is significantly more manageable and that's a problem of its own. But even so, the game's late stages had me slowly run into the same issues I remembered having all these years ago. Long, endless combat set pieces that start sucking out the enjoyment you might have had until this point. Which wasn't much to speak of anyway, because headshotting the headless chicken over and over again gets old pretty fast, as good as the animations are. From a gameplay perspective, Bioshock Infinite is a clear regression compared to the past 2 games of the series. The immersive sim elements that brought a lot of exciting gameplay options in the past were cut away in favor of a forgettable generic shooter experience. Not fun. In the past, I've given some slack to games that sacrifice one of its aspects as long as the other ones were well made. In this case, it's pretty clear that the story and its presentation were the top priority when developing the game. Did it work? I don't think I need to say that. For the most part, Bioshock Infinite's writing hits many of the right marks. The story presentation aspect is, without a doubt, its strongest suit. The pacing is good, the dialogue is snappy, and it keeps it exciting until the end. Quite a few interesting themes are touched upon, but the level of depth varies. On the one hand, I'm tempted to say I'm disappointed, but on the other, I believe it's purposefully done to manipulate the player's perception in a good way. What do I mean by this? In short, after freeing Elizabeth from her tower, Booker searches for a way to leave Columbia. Naturally, their attempts don't go as planned and they end up mixed up with Vox Populi, Columbia's communist revolutionaries. They strike a deal. If Booker brings the weapons from their gunsmith, he'll be given the ticket out of the city. Setting out to do that, Booker and Elizabeth discover that the gunsmith was killed while under arrest. Out of options, Elizabeth takes the radical decision to open up a tear and transport the two of them into a parallel world, one where the gunsmith is still alive. Unfortunately, in this new world, the gunsmith is a loyal follower of Comstock, so they go into another tear where he will be alive and willing to help. This one ends up being what they searched for, but with Vox Populi devastating the entirety of Columbia in a bloody revolution. Here's the manipulation in action. Comstock's Columbia is a fanatical nativist utopia and much propaganda is shown to you along the way. But simultaneously you get glimpses of what's behind the curtain. A segregated bathroom here, someone making Vox Populi posters there. There are things that I perceived as being treated in a shallow manner initially. Nevertheless, it's pretty clear that Comstock's regime leaves a pretty bad impression. What you hear about Vox Populi outside with the official notes makes them seem like the good guys, the alternative. But by going into the Vox Revolution dimension, the game turns this all over its head. The cruelty and reckless violence of the revolution are shown in full display. If before you are able to root for them, seeing what they're capable of when they get their way makes you think about reconsidering that. takes some massive balls to paint the opposition to a nativist zealot in shades of grey this dark, I have to admit. But not all is fine and dandy, and for this part I'll have to go into spoiler territory. Yeah right, spoiler warning for a 10-year-old game, imagine that. Anyway, the story's central plot device is the concept of parallel worlds. As the story progresses, the twist unfolds. In reality, Elizabeth is not a daughter of Comstock, but a child taken out of another dimension from Booker himself. Not only did he not remember any of this, because interdimensional travel-induced amnesia is a very convenient plot device, and selectively applied by the way, but he is hit by a final revelation. Comstock is himself in the realities where he repented for his past sins by taking a baptism and going down the road of religious zealotry. Elizabeth, determined to wipe Comstock from all dimensions, concludes that to do that she has to kill every instance of Booker she can find. Which is stupid. Mere moments before this plot-defining twist, we are offered a lengthy exposition about the nature of parallel worlds, how there are virtually endless possible alternative realities, each with different details that set them apart ever so slightly. How the hell can you go from this to denying the multiverse's infinity moments later? If there are infinite worlds, there are infinite Bookers and Comstocks alongside infinite Elizabeths. An infinite does not cancel out another infinite, so her endeavor is pointless and dumb. This isn't the first discrepancy either. When Booker and Elizabeth hopped between worlds to get guns for Vox, it was clear that whatever deal they made in the first world was no longer valid in the others. Despite all evidence to the contrary, they kept acting as if getting the guns was of the utmost importance. This took the entire second act of the story, and its logical flaw is so apparent that I'm amazed Infinite received the praise it did. Its other elements, such as art direction, writing and story, were worthy, but the ending still soured the experience by quite a bit, to say the least. I'll be the first to admit that stories involving time and interdimensional travels are a nightmare to put together, but there's a difference between suspending disbelief while working with one of the inevitable paradoxes and another to mention that paradox directly and dismiss it seconds later. There are significantly better writers than me that could come up with more fitting endings, but this one definitely undermines the entire foundation upon which it's built. At least the I was Comstock all along twist was done well, even if it's nowhere near the masterpiece of Would You Kindly we all know and love. It's obvious to me that this plot is written by someone that doesn't fully understand the intricacies of quantum mechanics and parallel universes. Hell, even Ken Levine himself admits that he doesn't. His honesty is admirable, even through the veil of self-deprecation put on display. But it offers an obvious explanation as to why the story is such a mess, not like it makes the situation any better. I dislike how Infinite ditched its immersive sim inheritance for a mediocre shooter experience. That genre is not exactly the key to blockbuster titles, so I can understand the change from this perspective. But it doesn't change that what we've got falls very short. A gimped up immersive sim is not mandatory to turn into a mediocre shooter to have success. I also can't get over that fucking bell puzzle and that door code reference. Haha, look, it's the immersive sim number, haha, did you get the reference? Wow! They feel like mean jokes aimed at those wanting more than just a linear shooter experience. Therefore, as much as it pains me to admit, Bioshock Infinite is a decent game if taken as a whole and not the complete train wreck I remember it as. If you're a shooter fan and you want to have a go at this, I strongly discourage it. Because of this element, Infinite falls firmly into the overrated category. I did not have fun playing it, but I enjoyed watching its art direction and following its story. Only as long as it made sense. With that being said, thanks to everyone for sticking by. Do the things with the buttons that make the algorithm think my channel's any good, and don't forget to share this with your like-minded fellows. Until next time, cheers!